Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host Jakel, the world's worst YouTuber. I want to open up this video and add a disclaimer. This video is intended to be for entertainment purposes only. The following information is based on and is actual information. However, I don't want people running around acting like this is gospel. Just sit back, be entertained, and that is all that I'm asking from you. That being said, let's get to the video. Slenderman. Is he real? If he isn't real, is there something out there lurking in the woods that could be causing people to believe that he is real? Are these sightings legitimate, or is it completely just the imagination of the internet? All of these are questions that I hope to answer in today's video, taking on the topic of Slenderman in today's, what did I call this again? Coffee Table Internet Adventure. First off, I want to add that I do not believe that Slenderman is real. To give a brief history on Slenderman, Slenderman was generated out of a Photoshop contest on the Something Awful forums. Out of that, somebody had created a set of pictures where they implanted this creepy, tall, slender figure and a little backstory to go along with it. It was fresh, it was interesting, it was new, and it played on the fears of many people. From that, the internet took hold of it, it spread like wildfire, and an entire mythos was based around Slenderman. And many people went to the internet to try and find ways in history to legitimize Slenderman. There are two particular things that I'm going to debunk real quick to prove that Slenderman is not real. And that would be, there are two particular woodcuts around the history and the lore of both Der Grossman and Der Ritter. Alright, before I continue much further, I want to give credit where credit is due, and this is the gentleman who created Slenderman, Eric Knudsen, also known as Victor Surge. I realized that I didn't write down his name, so I just wanted to make sure that I gave him credit. He is the one that created the Slenderman Photoshop images, which spawned all of the Slenderman everything that we have today. Now, there is something very interesting that I want to highlight real quick. So, there are two major folklore and fairy tale type stories that are usually associated. See, I've done a lot of research recently. These stories, both Der Grossman and Der Ritter, are usually associated with Slenderman because they are similar stories. However, I want to tackle Der Grossman first. And yes, this little B sounding thing is an S sound, not a B sound. It's German, and it is known as an Esset, and it is given to create a specific kind of S sound. That way you know it's Grossman, not Grossman. So, let's just take a look real quick. Der Grossman, or the Tall Man, the Great Man, God bless it, would you load quicker, is a supposed mythical creature associated with woodcuts carved by an unknown artist in 16th century Germany. Said woodcuts portrayed it as a tall, disfigured man with white spheres where his eyes should be. Similar in appearance to the Slenderman, Der Grossman was commonly described as a fairy of the Black Forest who abducted bad children that entered the forest at night and would stalk them until they confessed their wrongdoings to a parent. However, this differs greatly in one regard to the Slenderman mythos of today, which is that Slenderman will stalk children and does not give up. So there's all of this. There's supposed accounts, relation to Slenderman, but there's one interesting fact that I want to add here. I want to point out here where it says relation to Slenderman. I'm just going to read it real quick. Der Grossman is a creepypasta written by a something awful user named Throw Up, about a mythical monster from the 16th century Germany implied to be Slenderman. Although most fans believe the story is a genuine myth, there is no proof of that claim being true because the only sites where information on the creature can be found are all Slenderman related. As such, it is more likely that people have simply spread a false rumor based on misinformation about the story, much like the Slenderman's debunked connection to the Der Ritter woodcuts. Some fans suspect the story was written in order to further connect Slenderman to Germany and Erking. So, if you scroll down a little bit, there seems to be some conflicting comments in this forum. I took German in high school, and there was a couple pages about Der Grossman in our book. I instantly made the connection to Slenderman. So there's some conflicting information that I don't want to say definitively one way or the other, but in my research, I agree with the same thing that Der Grossman, when you type in Der Grossman, it usually brings up topics about Slenderman. So if there is somebody out there with a link that they could provide me for the rest of the world to show that this is indeed an actual fairy tale and folklore from German history, I would love to prove this, because even though I'm sitting here debunking Slenderman, I love the story of Slenderman. But that's enough for Der Grossman. I want to take another look into Der Ritter. Here is what comes up when you look up Der Ritter, or at least when I do, because I know cookies and caches and shit. But let's take a look at the Der Ritter woodcut. This is the image that you usually get when you look for Der Ritter. And it is usually assumed that this figure right here, also Der Ritter means the knight, with a K. This is usually associated to be Slenderman or some Slender-like creature, but it is actually just a skeleton. Now let's take another look down further. Creator, Hans Holbein the Younger, or Holbein. Object credit, Rosenwald collection, print, Germany, German. So to say that it is 16th century German would be accurate. However, the origin and the inspiration behind Der Ritter, as given by Hans Holbein the Younger, is a little bit different than that. Sorry, I just caught myself sounding like one of those, well, actually, guys. Der Ritter, the Knight, is a small silver plaque that takes its design from Hans Holbein's Dance of Death series, first published in woodcut in 1538. The Dance of Death typically represents death leading all ranks and conditions of mankind to the grave and popularly appeared in various media well into the 17th century. So based on that alone, it would appear that this Hans Holbein didn't really have any intention to associate Der Ritter with anything other than this artistic representation that the philosophy that death depicts and predicts everything that we are going to do. Everything that we do is sort of like we are aware of our mortality, so we want to get things done before we die and leave our stamp on the world. And all of these here, Dance Macabre, the Noble Lady, the Old Man, the Abbess, and Dance Macabre would also mean Dance of Death. These are all part of the same series, which also depict something similar, where Hans Holbein was trying to give several different representations about how death sort of leads the way in our lives, whether we realize it or not. You might be wondering, if I just did my best attempt to debunk Slenderman, why are we here? Why did I make a video? Well, that is because I believe there is a possibility that there is something that has heard of and understands the Slenderman mythos and is using the form of Slenderman in order to scare people. And probably do some other kind of nefarious shit. This is because I have gone online and seen several supposed first-hand accounts. I'm not going to say that they're all real or legit, but considering the vast number of how many there are, one can assume that at least some of them are legitimate sightings of Slenderman. How could this be if Slenderman isn't real? Not only are there other first-hand accounts, but I actually have two friends who, ironically enough, I'm not going to name because I don't want them to be insane, sound insane, be pictured as such, and I don't want to out them like that. Just saying. I don't want to add chaos to their lives if I don't need to. Oh, well, that seems just likely. Are you entertained? Let's keep going. One of those friends, I asked while I was researching, I said, Slenderman, I'm making a video on Slenderman, thought of you first. Is there anything you want to add to the video? Info, juicy bits, first-hand accounts. All he said was, he long. Thank you, good friend, for the very treasured input. Because from my understanding, this friend also questions whether or not he actually saw Slenderman, because there is a very good chance that there is some kind, given the popularity and the widespread belief and coverage on the internet about Slenderman, there could have been some instance of mass hysteria, being paranoid, especially being a teenager, some kind of young adult. Slenderman, it's fucking scary! So there could be some sort of mass hysteria at play, which I'm not going to rule out. But that's just no fun, now is it? Now, before I completely move on, I want to read off one of the types of alleged first-hand accounts in which I'm talking about, because if you look deep enough, there's definitely plenty of sightings like this that make me wonder, since there are so many, is every single person making it up? Granted, a vast majority of them are. But I believe at least a few of these people have actually seen something. And this story that I found on Reddit, seems like it could fit the bill of being potentially a legitimate sighting. r/Slenderman, posted by u/cutes_creep 6 months ago. I've seen him 2 times and I'm not dead. In the Kananaskis area outside of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, there is a summer camp. I'm not naming it in case I get in trouble. And I was in their outdoors tribe, so basically we do everything outside, while the rest of the kids get to sleep in cabins. And one night, some of us decided to sleep outside our tarps area, outside our tarps around the fire pit, and I couldn't sleep because of the enormous amounts of mosquitoes, and my insomnia is an issue. Anyways, I was laying inside my sleeping bag, and it was about 12 a.m. I poked my head out of my sleeping bag and looked around, and I saw the other 2 kids sleeping, and then I turned over to look at the night sky to see him. He was standing over me, looking down at me. I laid there in my sleeping bag looking at him. I had enough with the terror that I felt and got up and ran to the tarp with the rest of the girls. I was 12 and a fanatic about him. I was 14 when the second time happened at the same camp we went on our trip. And if you don't know what that is, it's where a group of kids, 2 to 4 counselors, walk to a forested area outside of the actual camp. So we're At our site, the fire is made, and we are having a blast yelling campfire songs. Nighttime rolls by, and we are told to go to our separate tarps. The girls get a tarp, the boys get separate tarp, and the counselors have their tarp in between the two tarps. About 2 hours go by, and your girls are just talking and having fun, and me being the overly scared one. I started to scan the area and saw him in the trees. He blended in perfectly. I pointed it out to my friend, and she saw him too. We didn't say anything to the other girls because we didn't want them to think we were crazy, but I knew what I saw. I saw him. I know I did. Please comment and tell me how it's even possible to be alive after seeing him. I've always thought that once you see him, he kills you. Now, clearly, there's already some kind of disbelief where these people are saying, bruh, what? And then clown face, angry, huff, and some people agree. I've seen this character as well. He has marked me. As edgy as it sounds, he marked me 2 years ago when I was 16. I'm 18 now. He stalks me and my newborn day in and day out. When I'm home alone, he taunts me and makes me hallucinate some really disturbing images. I wish I could ultimately say I'm lying, but I'm not. I wouldn't wish this upon my own enemy. So there's still, to this day, how long ago was that comment? 2 months ago. 2 months ago, this comment was made. People are still seeing Slenderman, even though the meme is dead. People don't care anymore. I would be remiss to say that the Slenderman stabbing, if you don't know what it is, just look it up. If you haven't heard about it, what rock have you been living under? But in Waukesha about 4 years ago now, there were 2 girls, young teens, tweens, and they stabbed their friend trying to kill her. Luckily, the victim survived. The girls were ruled criminally insane and are spending a very long time in a criminal insane facility, or however you want to phrase it. I don't know, I didn't look into it, but it would be, I feel like I need to at least mention it, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. The reason I bring it up here is because that event sort of led to the downfall of the pop culture of Slenderman, where it was booming and all over the place. Now, you kind of don't really hear about it. And many people will say that the Slenderman movie put the final nail in the coffin. Even after both of those huge blows to the Slenderman mythos, people are still talking about Slenderman and claiming to see Slenderman. Man, I'm really starting to feel like Giorgio Tsoukalos, one of the main people from Ancient Aliens, in that show. He was speaking, and he said, sums up the entire show. He said, and I quote, "What we have here is a very clear potential yes." A very clear potential yes, and I really feel like I'm doing the same thing here. That's why I opened up this video by saying this is for entertainment purposes only. Moving on. The reason I am here in this video talking about Slenderman, even though I have done my best to try to debunk Slenderman, and I have done my best to show, okay, maybe it's not my best, but for the sake of time, I've thrown some examples and made some wild claims about some friends who allegedly saw Slenderman. Why, after all this time, are there people still claiming to see Slenderman? Here's my theory. I already stated it, but I'm going to restate it, because I didn't write an actual script for this. Now, I have to posit my entire thesis. Hypothesis? thesis. Hypothesis? What's the proper word? Whichever word is appropriate. I posit here that there is a chance that even though Slenderman does not exist, that there is something with traits similar, if not identical, to Slenderman that has been posing as Slenderman specifically to scare people. In order to do that, we need to quickly go over what are some of Slenderman's known traits. And then we can look at some of the actual creatures, entities, spirits, specters, ghouls, and goblins from actual history and folklore that could fit the same description as Slenderman without being Slenderman. First things first, what are Slenderman's abilities? What is Slenderman known for being able to do? So, based on some of the research that I've done, I have compiled a short list of some of his abilities. Those include selective invisibility, so he can choose who he is visible to, tentacle arms, one of the key traits in his appearance, height change, anywhere between 6 and 15 feet, psychic influence, which means he can psychically influence your emotions and your thoughts, teleporting, also known as slender step or slender walking, which he apparently walks very quickly or teleports to be one place or another. Hangs out in the woods, so that's not really an ability, just kind of a trait. And for some reason, he favors children. However, I want to go to the official slenderman.fandom.com/wiki abilities of the Slenderman for a more in-depth look at some of his abilities to see if we can get a better rounded description of what are exactly his abilities and what they are known to do. Alright, the abilities of Slenderman. Slender walking. One of Slenderman's most infamous abilities, slender walking, is an ability of the Slenderman that allows him to appear and disappear at will, granting him his omnipresent-like movement, allowing him to teleport from one point to another virtually anywhere instantly, and often without any physical indication of the teleportation. The ability is often explained in a variety of forms, and depending on the depiction in that medium, it may be substantially different. An example, a paranormal explanation rather than a scientific one, or a demonic explanation rather than an alien one. The theory of Slenderman as a fourth-dimensional being is one of few explanations to try and explain this using the quantum theory, but to date no factual statement has been made that fully determines this explanation. Camouflage, which I am also going to include invisibility into here, sort of like the Predator. It's more like a cloaking. The ability of the Slenderman to disguise itself is one of his more important traits. The most well-known camouflage is that of the contemporary suit-wearing Slenderman. The most supported theory is that Slenderman takes the appearance of a member of higher class, rank, or notable social position, a night warrior or suited man, in order to gain trust or acceptance from a person, or at the very least to blend in at a distance. This was based on evidence drawn from a 16th century woodcut entitled Der Ritter, which we already debunked. Variation of this theory is that Slenderman's appearance varies from person to person, slightly appearing how the individual's mind comprehends it. Interesting. I'm going to say that's interesting. It should also be noted that the early mythos, Slenderman appeared to have a face, but it did not appear on film. This seems to suggest that he can make himself appear to have a face, but that this illusion, while visible to the human eye, does not transfer to film. This is a possible ability he could use to blend in as a faceless person, would stand out a bit, and onlookers would start panicking, allowing his target to escape in the ensuing chaos. Moving on. Mind control. The loose definition of mind control is utilized and assured by many series across the mythos and perpetuated in blogs and video series. Exactly what this mind control entails is extremely loose and very poorly defined, although it is always an inevitable topic when discussing proxies, a term coined by Dark Harvest 00. I'm going to say that this is what I called in my list psychic influence, because as we go on, it's not exactly control as much as it is very insidiously influencing the person. As most series state, proxies work on behalf of Slenderman, who controls their thoughts and feelings, and through that their actions. Proxies may still have partial free will, and may or may not know that they are being controlled. They are used to interact with other victims, set traps, or give information to the victims on behalf of Slenderman. It is debated as to the full independence of the proxies, and some suggest that when under his control, proxies act as a collective hive mind. Examples include the collective of Tribe 12. It is assumed in some iterations of Slenderman that he is capable of puppeteering and controlling the proxies directly. However, such evidence has never actually been shown in a vlog or blog, only assumed. So that's where I'm going to say that I note something interesting there. Why does Slenderman need proxies? Proxies are sort of like people who have willingly or unwillingly given their lives up to the Slenderman to be his servants. Why does he need servants in order to interact with the physical world? It's almost as if he's a non-physical being. Pin that for later. Impersonation. Rarely seen in contemporary mythos, early accounts show Slenderman's ability to impersonate or mimic the voice and tone of a person in order to get a victim. The most common use in voice mimicking for the purpose of luring a child or victim out of a safe area. He is also able to produce the sound of a child's giggle, perhaps to draw another child in. But put a pin in that for later. I'm going to say this can also be classified under shape-shifting and general illusion. Tentacles and Tendrils, another of his famous abilities. Slenderman's human-like appearance often disintegrates upon the appearance of its tentacles or limbs, also to be referred to as Tendrils, while appearing far less in contemporary are the main exception being Tribe 12. The tentacles played prominent roles in the original mythos. Slenderman's tentacles number into the tens regularly, and it is unknown how many he can spawn, usually from his back or shoulders, though he commonly spawns about 6. The tentacles themselves are used primarily for reaching, grabbing, or overtaking obstacles, and have been shown to be rather powerful. Some original mythos, stories, and images make use of Slenderman's tentacles for balance, walking, supporting, or climbing, not dissimilar from a spider's legs. This is one of the only other ways Slenderman has ever been shown to move besides slender walking. Selective visibility or invisibility, which is basically he can choose who sees him and what each person sees. Pyrokinesis. Normally, I was going to overlook this, but I feel like it might be important for later. Early mythos and some ARGs have strong connection between Slenderman and fire. In the original mythos, almost all Slenderman visitations are accompanied by fire, either after or during. He may be able to use pyrokinesis, which is the ability to move or control fire with one's mind. Often the fire kills witnesses or destroys evidence of its existence. Photography of the fires often show the Slenderman in or around the fire. In some cases, the fire is blue, and on rare occasions green. It is not known why this change in color occurs or what motive any of the fire has, although chemicals are known to change the color of fire. Okay, let's just go over real quick. Weather and day control, telepathy, so he can speak into your mind, which is the main and primary way which Slenderman communicates with people. Pain reduction and prolonging death, slender sense. But I want to focus on Pyrokinesis, the sickness, also known as Slender Sickness. In several series and ARE, characters in contact with or in some form of relationship with the Slender Man may come under sickness. This sickness causes coughing, bleeding from the mouth, nose, or eyes, vomiting, disorientation, potential blackouts, and potentially fevers, which first appeared in 12 Tribes and can now be seen in Marble Hornets and ML Anderson Zero. In Everyman Hybrid, the sickness is attributed to Sigma radiation. Ooh, interesting. Which is assumed is released by the Slender Man. This may make it a form of radiation poisoning. It is important to note that outside of AREs and ARGs, very little data exists on how sickness works. The Slender Sickness is something that is, in my knowledge, has always been associated with Slender Man. There are telltale signs that you can tell that you're not going crazy if you're seeing Slender Man, and that is in association with Slender Sickness. Physical traits and symptoms of being in contact with Slender Man. And we just read some of them, but I went to several sources and wrote down some of the most common traits of Slender Sickness, most commonly displayed in Proxies or servants, which would be... Hey, shut up, telemarketer. Where was I? Slender Sickness. Paranoia or random panic attacks, particularly with when feeling the presence of Slender Man, at least in first contact, because it is believed that with Proxies, the Slender Sickness and the paranoia becomes a form of comfort. So if you're not fully a proxy, and still just a victim, you'll get paranoia and a panic attack when in the presence. And the paranoia is what I believe to be something made to drive you insane. Lapses in memory or short-term memory loss, where just like it sounds a lot to me like with some alien abduction cases where people will be driving or walking and all of a sudden, bam, they're somewhere else. Time has been taken away from them. They don't know how to account for the last hour, 2 hours, and they got from one place to another like that. Come to find out, time has passed. So lapses in memory, missing time, nosebleeds, nausea, cough, deja vu, aches and pains. I suffer with bipolar and PTSD, and up until a few months ago, I was suffering pretty hard from it. If you've been on my channel for a long time, I have not made secret of my mental health issues that I have had. I haven't gone into it, I haven't glorified it, I haven't made it part of my platform, but I don't act like I don't deal with it. Which gives me a lot of credibility to particular videos like this. But I have dealt with panic attacks, anxiety attacks, all kinds of issues where I'm going to posit a theory. I'm not sure about nosebleeds, but with a panic attack, in my experience, I'm not going to blanket this for everybody, but in my experience with panic attacks, it's either sudden or it's a slow burn, then all of a sudden, bam! And you're panicking and you're freaking out. Sometimes you crumple up into a ball, sometimes you throw a fit and act like a cage animal, but that's coming from me, which most of my issues come from having PTSD. So it might be different for other people that have panic attacks based on more anxiety and less trauma. Excuse me. Basically, you freak out, your body sort of like shuts down and tenses up. Sometimes it's in fits of rage, sometimes it's fits of crying and sobbing, but your body is panicking. It's locking up, it's freaking out, lashing out, whatever's going on, your body is taking an actual physical toll. And with that, with anxiety and panic and fear and stuff like that, something happens in your body, adrenaline hits, and cortisol rises. Cortisol is a chemical that, if there is too much of it, it can actually start to break down your body, such as with muscles and joints primarily. Don't quote me on that entirely. That's just what I've taken. I'm not a doctor. I could be misinformed. But it makes me think that maybe this Slender Sickness isn't necessarily associated with Slenderman taking you over, but whatever Slenderman is actually inducing such a state of paranoia that you're having anxiety attacks, your nose bleeds because your blood pressure spikes, and all of a sudden that blood is coming out of your nose. Nausea because you're anxious and worried all the time. I've been anxious to the point of throwing up before. Cough. Your respiratory issues that are coming from this anxiety. Too much anxiety can actually cause breathing problems. Part of that going with the adrenaline spike and the cortisol spike. Deja vu. When you're in a prolonged period of paranoia and anxiety, you can start to have deja vu. The deja vu makes me think that basically what I'm saying is, if Slenderman exists in the sense that something is posing and taking the likeness of Slenderman, whatever it is, isn't necessarily taking them to... how do I put it? It's all psychically, entity, spiritually induced anxiety and paranoia, driven to such a point that it's taking a physical and mental toll, affecting your mind, body, and, if you believe in such thing, spirit. This sounds a lot like how demons operate. Demons and other negative entities like them have a habit of using these mind game tactics to psychically influence people to drive them insane, because it is when people are afraid, in fear, out of a clear mental state. People who have mental issues are prime targets. Now, I don't want this to cause fear for anybody. I'm going with the general consensus and believed understanding of spirits and negative entities. But people who do suffer from anxiety, paranoia, and things like that can be a prime target for negative entities, because they are easily jostled by the way that a negative entity could influence and manipulate somebody's emotions. Because it's when the person is in fear, paranoia, that they are easily susceptible to the negative influence. I'm going to try and stop talking in circles and hope that I don't have to over-explain myself and move on to the next subject, because this is going to make more sense as I go on. Hopefully, it's going to make more sense. Let's move on. Now, there's also, in some cases, that people will say that fever, burns and lesions, eye redness and burning, vomiting, bloody vomit, bloody stool, major amnesia are things that are associated with Slender Sickness, but I feel like this really comes more in with the... this idea comes from the side of the mythos that is trying to perpetuate the idea that Slender Sickness is a side effect of Sigma radiation poisoning. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Take it as you will. I'm not going to rule it out. However, I'm going to say it sounds more out of the realm of what I personally believe. Although I'm not telling you what to believe. Just saying this is how I'm seeing it. Now that I've rambled on for quite some time now let's get down to more of the brass tacks, if you will. The million-dollar question. If something is posing as Slenderman to incite fear into victims, what could that thing be? Now, in order to do this, I'm going to compare abilities of other things that I think are likely suspects and compare them to the traits and abilities of Slenderman. And the first one up is what I'm going to consider the most likely suspect, at least in Western ways of thinking, because here in the West, in America and the UK, we have this belief of a more Christian, Abrahamic religion way of thinking. And with that comes demons and fallen angels and such like that. So when anything negative and supernatural happens, people instantly jump to the thought of it being demonic. However, I'm going to say I'm not convinced that it is a demon. Now, why is that? Well, for starters, let's start off with what is Slenderman able to do? And I'm just going to say, here's the ability. Is a demon able to do that? Selective invisibility or visibility. No, demons are not able to do that. Demons are not able to do that. Tentacle arms. Again, usually demons are not visible. We can sense them if you have some sort of psychic inclination, if you will, force sensitive, if you will. We can sense them, feel the manipulations, feel that something's wrong in our head, but usually the modus operandi of a demon is to get into a person's mind, make them lose their mind, and then get in and possess that person. And the purpose of possession is to destroy that person, mentally, spiritually, and physically. We don't normally see demons. Demons aren't really something you see. They're a spiritual entity. So you can get a demon in the ghost hunting type of sense, where you can use EVP, pictures, cameras to pick up on them, but they operate in a similar way to ghosts and spirits and other entities work. That's my main reason for saying that it's probably not a demon, is we don't normally see demons. They don't have that selective visibility, invisibility. Tentacle arms. I'm sure there is a chance that demons have tentacle arms. For starters, I don't know what demons look like. Height change, 6 to 15 feet. If one were able to see a demon, I'm sure that it could change its height in order to create the illusion that it is bigger than it is, in order to create fear. Psychic influence. Absolutely, a demon could do that. That's sort of the whole thing that a demon does, is to psychically influence, give you those little thoughts of like, oh, I'm fucking up, rack you with guilt, and make you susceptible to more manipulation like that. That's usually how demons operate. They get into you and find those little things in your facade to exploit and make you feel like shit so it can break you down. So yes, absolutely. Teleporting or slender step. I don't think so. There is a chance that demons are able to teleport, but I'm not sure. I'm not convinced, though I'm not going to say it's impossible. Hangs out in the woods. Absolutely, definitely something I believe could happen. Absolutely possible. Favors children. I'm not sure. It depends on which type of lore you subscribe to when you believe in demons. Because there's a lot of times where we think of a demon, and there is a specific definition of non-human, destructive, evil entity. However, I feel like that's a very generalized and broad understanding of what demons are, because if you think about, sort of say, from a Japanese perspective, people who watch anime understand what I'm getting at. Everything non-human is a demon. I believe that's because when the anime in the manga gets translated into English, we don't really have a word for what oftentimes is yokai or other various types of words to represent monster. some kind of negative spirit monster. Sometimes not spirit, because, okay, there's a kappa. If you don't know what a kappa is, it's like a turtle creature. It's got like it's got like sort of like a bird beak, and they lure people into the water to try and drown them. A kappa would be considered some type of demon by rough translation. I wouldn't consider that a demon. I would consider that a monster more than a demon. So I'm not sure. It depends on what way you think about it, because you could think that all non-human entities could be demons, but almost all demons are negative. Not all kappa are negative. So it's a very broad generalization to say it depends on what you think a demon is. What I think a demon is a very specific kind of destructive entity that is in and of itself its own thing. So, favors children depends on what you define demon to be. My definition of demon, not so much. Definitely could. It can easily take the shape of a child in order to convince you that you're speaking to a ghost of a child. But I don't know. I'm talking in circles at this point. Before I get carried away, I'm going to move on. And then there's the whole case of Slender Sickness. Unless the demon is making you think that you have Slender Sickness, and by some sort of placebo effect, you start to exhibit those traits even though there's nothing other than your mind making you exhibit those traits, then I'm not going to say that it would actually indeed cause, from an external source, the Slender Sickness symptoms. So I feel like there is a case that it could be some sort of demon that is taking the guise of Slender Man, but I'm not convinced. I believe there are better candidates for this. There is another thing that it could be, and I almost feel like it's a cop-out, or maybe that's just a sign that I am not satisfied with the answer, but I feel like it is necessary to go over it anyway, because when I was researching, I was like, okay, what could Slender Man be? It seemed very obvious that one of the answers could be a Tulpa. A Tulpa is a thought form. People often say, oh, Tibetan thought form, like they do in the show Supernatural. What? Are only Tibetans capable of it? No, it's a human thing. Tulpa is a Tibetan word coined by Tibetan monks because the idea was that if you get enough people together and you thought about something really hard, you could create something sort of like a ghost or a spirit, but it is mentally created. Something that we might call it in today's little psychic circles, or if you've seen The Dead Files, featuring Steve DeShavie and Amy Allen, Amy often refers to something called a PK manifestation, or psychokinetic manifestation. That is something that you create with your mind, and then based on either your own strong emotions, usually negative, it will create its own sentience. Or if you think too hard on something, like sometimes imaginary friends are tulpas, or psychokinetic manifestations. Because you think about something really hard, you sort of wish it into existence, not in the same way that you literally wish something into existence, but in a spiritual sort of way, the same way a ghost would exist in this spirit world. That imaginary friend is now your child's tulpa. So, what we have here, I just went to Google. Well, I did go to Google. YouTube. What is a tulpa? Interestingly enough, I have a habit of liking the videos I'm watching. Tulpa Guides, the channel, Tulpa Guide. Tulpas are incredibly complex and not well understood, but here's a quick overview of the fundamental concepts around them. Now, here it is. What is a tulpa? Tulpa is explained in another 2 minutes. Let's take a look.
What is a tulpa? A tulpa is an intentionally created entity within your own mind that functions as a separate consciousness alongside your own. For all intents and purposes, a tulpa can be considered a full person if well developed. An easy way to think of this would be an imaginary friend that can think, feel, and hold opinions just like any real person can. Tulpas are not related to schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, or other mental health conditions in any way. These conditions are respectively characterized by uncontrollable hallucinations and switches between alternate personalities. Tulpas are controlled and cannot exceed the bounds set by the person who created them. Tulpas cannot take control of the body without permission, cannot harm the host without other present mental conditions, and typically hold similar ethics, values, and reservations to ordinary people. Tulpas usually have a preferred appearance when visualized by their creator that can range from an ordinary human to a magical creature to a nondescript ball of light. It is possible to have more than one tulpa. Most people only create one or two tulpas because beyond this point, it can become difficult to keep track of them without one or more going dormant. Some have 10 or more tulpas. Yes, tulpas are real. They are neither delusion nor a fantasy. Anyone can create them, but understand that this is a lifelong commitment and typically not an easy accomplishment.
So yeah, there we go. What is a tulpa? Now, mind you, Tulpa Guides is a whole channel dedicated to tulpas, research, and understanding of tulpas. So if you're interested, please go ahead and look at more of tulpas so you are more well-versed in what tulpas are. I just feel like that was a good introductory thing, and I hope I don't get striked for using pretty much the whole video. So, back in 2014 when I first started really doing research into Slenderman, trying to figure out what it was, my first thought was tulpa. However, I am not the only one. As I recently started doing research here for this particular video, I realized there are a lot of people that subscribe to the tulpa ideology of explaining Slenderman. I'm going to say it is very extremely likely that it could be a tulpa. Let's take a closer look into what a tulpa is. Now, I do feel it is completely necessary to go and look for more information, some reading information about tulpas. If you're reading this, you're likely entirely new to the tulpa phenomenon. If you want to learn more about tulpas and eventually create your own, you will have a lot of reading to do, but this is a good place to start. This text is a rundown of what tulpas are and what they can do and of what they aren't and can't do. It's a very subjective phenomenon, and this article is a representation of this community's views. Take in information with an open mind and make your own judgments about the thing you read. So since we already read what a tulpa, or watched what a tulpa is, what is a tulpa good for? AKA, what can they do? The usual reason for creating a tulpa is having them around for companionship, which means that the most important aspect is being able to properly communicate with them. There are different ways of communicating with a tulpa, of which the most common is one through mind voice, or telepathic communication. Hearing a tulpa's mind voice means hearing thoughts that aren't your own, and you respond by directing thoughts of your own back to your tulpa. It can take anywhere from a couple of days to several months to hear your tulpa in this way, and in some cases longer. Before starting to hear their tulpa's thoughts, some people get a head pressure when they interact with their tulpas, a throbbing sensation that usually fades with time. A clearer way of sensing your tulpa before you can communicate with them directly is through emotional responses, which can be described as feeling emotions that aren't your own. You may be able to notice easily when your tulpa is very happy or sad, or feels strongly about something in any way. An advanced technique in the community is imposition, which consists of hallucinating your tulpa with any of your senses. When you master it, your tulpa will seamlessly fit into reality as you see it with your own eyes, and you'll be able to hear them speak, smell them, and even feel the texture of their skin and clothes, as if they were really there. Of course, they won't become physical human beings, and unless you delude yourself, you won't believe that they are. These are controlled hallucinations, but even so, you'll be able to interact with your tulpa in a much more real way, and it's considered the end game for many people in this community. That being said, I am going to say here, do not make a tulpa of your own. This is not a definitive work, and I am going to implore that you do not start messing with making a tulpa. Maybe tulpas are just a way of making yourself hallucinate and making something in your mind that isn't actually there. That being said, do you really want to hallucinate something into existence? Probably not. However, I could be wrong. That's just one explanation that I'm getting from this. Proceed with caution. I am doing this for research purposes and to present it to you here. I do not want you to go ahead and try to make a tulpa, unless you really want to, but look into the dangers of making a tulpa first. So, what a tulpa isn't, and good practices. There's plenty of people that have weird beliefs about tulpas, and you'll probably see that for yourself if you stay in the community. You have a right to your own beliefs, but in this community as a whole, tulpas aren't seen as spirits or supernatural beings, nor do they have magical powers or any influence on things outside your mind and body. Tulpas aren't demons, they aren't manifestations of your subconscious, and aren't the devil trying to entice you to do evil. Tulpas are not malicious unless you really mess up during the creation process and treat your tulpa in a way that makes them utterly hate you, and even then a tulpa can't really do you much harm. Tulpas aren't self-imposed schizophrenia or whatever other mental illness you might be thinking of. I'm not sure how accurate that is. However, I am open to both interpretations. Making yourself hallucinate something into existence, or actually creating something with your mind into existence. Either way, always do your research, kids. Just saying. You won't go crazy and you won't have random hallucinations. It's all perfectly safe and fun. Please look at the phenomena rationally and consider that you have plenty of control over your mind and what happens in it. Rationally. Don't just listen to this. I feel like this is a very biased article that we're reading here. So I will link this in the description if you want to go check it out yourself. Also, all videos that I include will be in the description, as I feel it is general rule of thumb to include the things that you are presenting if they are not yours. To finish the subject of tulpas, I just want to say that one person can make them, or several people. The original idea behind tulpas is that the more the merrier. The more people that are putting concentration into this thought form will indeed make a stronger, more powerful tulpa, which is why it is a very strong idea within the community to think that if Slenderman is real, it would be a tulpa, because there are countless people that have bought into the Slenderman mythos and believe that Slenderman is real. So, therefore, a large community of people would indeed be able to bring something like that into tulpa type of life. What was I going to say? Honestly, tulpa could definitely, absolutely, in every single way, completely explain Slenderman. The only thing that it doesn't explain is the radiation side effects of the Slender Sickness. That being said, I still would hazard a guess to put money, and I am not a betting person, I would put money on the idea that a Slender Sickness could manifest in that way, depending on what way you're going to think and look at it. However, it wouldn't be from radiation poisoning. I am going to put in my last bid for this example as to what Slenderman could be. I feel like this entity, this type of creature, could definitely explain every single bit of Slenderman. They are a type of creature that is unknown mostly to the Western world. And when it is known, we don't really understand the full gravity of what these things are. My example, my posit, what I honestly believe, or in the very least, like the best, because it's the funnest to think about, is that of the race of the Djinn. For those of you who are completely westernized like me, the only idea that you might have about Djinn are from Aladdin. Yes, because the Djinn are the same thing that genies are based off of. Either spelled D-J-I-N-N or J-I-N-N. Djinn is the plural form of genie. However, based on lore and other understandings of Western comprehension of said Djinn race, it is extremely downplayed to understand what a Djinn is. When I started looking into Slenderman, trying to figure out what Slenderman could be, it was around that same time that I picked up this book. Now, I'm not going to say that this book is gospel about what Djinn are. However, most of the time when you're talking about Djinn, it is shrouded in lore and religious understandings from the Islamic faith. Because many of the lore and stories based on Djinn come from a Muslim perspective, because they are based very deeply in the lore of the Middle East. So a lot of what we understand about Djinn is shrouded and wrapped up in religious fantasy, fiction, belief, understanding, perspective. This book does really good to unwrap that religious casing around them and actually posits the idea that Djinn are not just some amorphous boogeyman, but actually a race of creatures alongside mankind, simply living in an alternate dimension or the spirit world, but in fact are people, just a different race of people, much like you and I. Now, for a basic introduction to the Djinn, I feel like I should just get the basics out. They are another race of being, if you're looking at it from a religious perspective, and I'm not a religious person, but I'm saying according to the lore, most of it being religious. God created angels, genies, and man. Genies came before angels. During the Great War of the Angels and the fall of Lucifer, many genies sided with the dark side, if you will, and even some that didn't dislike humans because they feel like we have destroyed the planet that was originally supposed to be theirs to inherit, but now we have taken it over, and not only have we taken it over, we have destroyed it. Not sure how much I buy into it, but I feel like it is still important to add in the synopsis of genies. Again, if you are looking at this religiously, angels were made from light. Mankind was made from clay. In that same way, genies were made from a smokeless fire. So many people that see them see either a fire or a cloud of fire-like smoke. Which is why I thought it was interesting when they mentioned that Slenderman is thought to be pyrokinetic, because that goes hand in hand. If Slenderman is a genie in disguise, that fire, particularly multiple different colors of fire, as many genie are supposed to be different colors, usually green, blue, red, orange, yellow. I thought that was really interesting to go along with the same lore, positing that Slenderman is a genie. Technically, the accurate way to say it is Djinn is plural and genie is singular. but I'm a white, western, uncultured swine. So take me with a grain of salt. Also, genies, Djinn, the Djinn, are mortal, like us. They live, breathe, die. They need to eat. They just live in a parallel dimension to ours, where things are similar, but slightly different. They too need to eat. They too need food and sustenance and water and all of that other good stuff. But they live for a very long time, which means their psychic and magical powers, they have a longer time to work on those things, which is why they are known, believed, and feared to be much more psychically, spiritually, and physically inclined than humans. Genies are known to shapeshift. Oftentimes they are seen as a dog, snake, falcon, or a cat. But they can take on the shape of anybody or anything. They can look like somebody that you know. They can look like your very own cat. They can look like just about anything, especially if they are powerful and advanced enough. Now, to be clear, I don't want to paint all of the Djinn to be evil. They are just like you and me. However, they are different in the way that they see the world, since they are a different type of being. So, some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are neutral. I'm sure there are some that are religious and some that are atheist. Who knows? It's just safe to assume that they are very similar to us, but also very different. That being said, they are supposedly, reportedly, very likely to play pranks without concern to a human's mortality. In other words, they play pranks and they don't care if we live or die in the process. Or some of them are just outright playful. Many of the times that we think there's a poltergeist and we can't identify it, they're playing pranks which scare the hell out of us, but to them it's good fun. And also, if you are going to look at it from a religious perspective, or a magical psychic perspective, depending on what school of thought you come from, they are believed to be masters of illusion and all-around sorcerers. They are tricksters, pranksters, and they like to fool us. So, all of this is exactly why I think that it is likely that a genie, or several of the Djinn, could be using the Slenderman disguise in order to scare us, lure us, pretty much fuck with us. Sometimes even kill us. Who knows? Before I forget, I want to also add that the Djinn are known to live in woods, deserts, abandoned locations, ruins, and large lakes. It is also said that the Djinn like to live in the ground, or holes in the ground. Oftentimes what we think are molehills or are snake holes, fox holes, are actually genie holes. Because in some way that's where they live, whether it's a portal to their dimension or that's where they actually have a home. Who knows? Mind you, this is all through the speculation and the guise and the gaze and the perspective of religious people and ancient folklore. What I'm most concerned about is their abilities, what they're able to do, and how that associates with Slenderman. So, let's go back over those traits of Slenderman, and see how it matches up with a genie. Selective invisibility, choosing who gets to see them, who they are invisible to, and what each person sees them as. Absolutely they are able to do that. Tentacle arms. They are made from a smokeless fire, or what modern spiritualists might call ectoplasm, or spirit matter. They would absolutely be having a shape-shifting ability, but absolutely be able to make tentacle arms. Height change. They can completely change their body to be 6 feet, 15 feet, 45 feet. Doesn't matter. It is told in lore that they are able to do these things. Psychic influence. To communicate with a person, odds are they're going to use telepathic communication and other psychic abilities. Certainly, there is a chance that if you subscribe to the supernatural and the paranormal, that they can project a voice that you can actually hear. However, most times it's going to be in your head, as if it is somebody else's thoughts being put into your own. Much in the same way that Slenderman does. Teleportation, or slender step / slender walking. Absolutely. Either they actually can teleport, they slip back into an alternate dimension to somehow in some way teleport where they're actually moving just at a rapid speed relative to ours, so it looks like they're teleporting, or there's multiple of them playing the same trick to make it seem like they are teleporting when there's actually multiples of them, since they are masters of pranks, which is exactly what they would do to freak us out. Whether it be malevolent or just playing pranks, it's absolutely something that they would do, in theory. Hangs out in the woods. Absolutely, they hang out in the woods. Many of them are said to have homes in the woods, in holes in the ground, ruins, abandoned places, wilderness. That is their home. Where people aren't is where they live. So absolutely, they would hang out in the woods. So, favors children. I feel like not necessarily that they would favor children, but it is the belief of myself and many other people that we all are to some extent force sensitive or psychically sensitive. I'm trying to put it in a way that makes me sound a lot less pretentious. However, this video is doing really good at that, and I sound pretentious all over the place. However you want to put it, we are all inclined to noticing, feeling, and perceiving the supernatural. Especially when we are kids. We are all born that way. However, as life goes on, we believe less in those things, so we sort of turn those senses off or dial them down. So I'm not sure if it's that they favor children or they spend more time messing around with kids because they are able to perceive them better. So take that as you will. But it is very likely that if there is a genie messing with people as Slenderman, then it would definitely be perceived that they are messing with kids. Also, what about the Proxies? I'm going to take a slight detour back into the internet to see what exactly a proxy is.
Man, with my hair like this, people are going to think I look like an anime character. Anyhow, here we are on Quiblo.com, looking at the steps on how to become a Slenderman proxy. Step 1. Get noticed and stalked by Slenderman. You will see Slenderman basically everywhere you go, as if he is following you. The reason he does this is either A, he is curious about you, B, he's seeing if you are worthy or good enough for the job, C, he wants to drive you insane and or kill you. This stalking Time varies. In some cases, it's a few months, a lot of months, a year, or even many years. During this time, you will also get really bad headaches, fear, and paranoia. You will also get what is referred to as Slender Sickness. The symptoms of Slender Sickness are coughing fits, coughing up blood, occasional nausea, paranoia, vomiting, and extreme exhaustion. Many have also had bloody noses, fever, and sometimes amnesia, as well as deja vu, painful breathing, difficulty swallowing, and violent convulsions. If he likes what he sees and you have proven yourself, you will most likely be on to step 2, unless he's been doing step 1 in order to kill you. Step 2, Slenderman will reveal himself to you and have a chat with you. He will tell you of his plans for you to work for him / be a proxy. If you say no to his request, he will kill you. If you say yes, will black out and wake up safely at your house. It is unknown if Slenderman takes you there or you walk there yourself. Step 3, interchangeable with Step 4. Second meeting, getting your mark. Little known fact, Slenderman puts a scar on his proxies to identify them as a proxy. Step 4, interchangeable with 3, getting used to Slenderman and the Slender Sickness. Eventually, the extreme paranoia turns into a feeling of comfort. As I was saying earlier, you will be able to interact and be near Slenderman without having any of the horrible Slender Sickness symptoms, minus amnesia and blackouts, which will still occur even when you're a proxy. Step 5, strange habits, urges phase. The weird urge to draw the operator symbol and eventually doing it without thinking about it, or the little circle with the X. It is near impossible to stop yourself. Your muscles will control themselves and do it against your will. Strange habit number 2 is walking in the woods every day against your will, and the strange urge to be outside more often. After getting your mark, step 6. After your mark, you are now technically a proxy, but I don't really count someone as being a proxy until they get to this point, being able to communicate with Slenderman in your head and hear his voice without it hurting you. For those of you who don't know, Slenderman communicates through thought. It is at this point that you can finally do jobs for him and go on missions. This sounds like steps toward being possessed. What I believe here, what people are describing as Slenderman, is actually going through the steps of possessing somebody. Another little known fact is many, especially the old Djinn, tend to see humans as property or as slaves. So the mark, the operator symbol, the scar, would be sort of like a brand. So let's go through it, and go through it with the idea that you are being possessed instead of becoming a proxy. Get noticed and stalked by Slenderman. Get the thing's attention. It's watching you. It either wants you or wants you dead. You also have headaches, fear, paranoia. This is because, here's the thing. Demons are known for possessing people, most commonly. However, it is because of that, I believe many times when somebody is being possessed, legitimate cases of possession, not just mental disorders being misdiagnosed as possession, legitimate possession, it often gets misdiagnosed as demonic when it is actually a genie. There's a couple of different ways you can tell. A demon plays the long game. They'll wait for years and exploit your insecurities and slowly creep in. And once they do, it is violent and they take you over like that. Djinn, on the other hand, have a way of possessing people by making them go crazy. Their preferred method is paranoia. A Djinn will possess somebody not by making them afraid or playing the long game, but making somebody so paranoid that they are able to cast these illusions, make people hallucinate, and manipulate that fear and anxiety, that straight up paranoia, to their favor to make the person literally go insane. So, that's the thing. That's one of the main things that's making me think that it's a genie trying to possess somebody or get to a minor stage of possession in order to control the person. So what I'm thinking is this, assuming Slenderman is a genie, this is the genie minorly possessing the person, controlling them. Because as I stated before, they are people like us, but they are not physical to us. I hazard a guess to think that they are physical to each other, but they cannot affect us without the help of other things. So I don't think Slenderman or Genie would be able to affect us, which is why it needs hosts, proxies, servants, slaves. So, with that in mind, they use paranoia in order to possess somebody and make them go insane. And oftentimes, especially some of the older Djinn, they see humans as pets, slaves, servants, etc. Keep that in mind. Seeing if you are worthy or good enough to do the job, a good little slave wants to drive you insane or kill you. A genie would not kill you. They would drive you insane to the point of you committing suicide. During this time, you also get headaches, fear, and paranoia, symptoms of a genie possession. You'll also get what is referred to as Slender Sickness. Symptoms of Slender Sickness are coughing fits, coughing up blood, which I already posited is actually possibly a symptom of this paranoia that the genie would be inducing. And extreme exhaustion. There's something that people don't talk about. If it is based in paranoia and it is based in something like that, anxiety, paranoia, panic attacks, it is very physically taxing. So of course you would wind up exhausted from this. Many people have also had bloody noses, spike in temperature, or spike in blood pressure, fever. I'm not sure about that, but I'm sure that if you are going through all of this, your immune system is extremely compromised, which leads you open to becoming sick. Sometimes amnesia as well as deja vu, painful breathing, difficulty in swallowing, and violent convulsions, which is also a telltale sign of possession. I'm not sure if I subscribe to convulsions being a part of possession or it's a sign of epilepsy or something, but I know that's part of the general mythos of Genie. If he likes what he sees and you have proven yourself, you'll be move on to step 2 unless he's doing step 1 to kill you. Slenderman will reveal himself to you and have a chat with you. He will tell you if your plan for you is to be a proxy. If you say no to his request, he will kill you. If you say yes, you will black out and wake up safely at your house. If you say yes, you are saying yes to Slenderman, who is actually a genie. You are opening yourself up to becoming possessed by that. You've given this thing permission to possess you, so you are relinquishing your fight against it. Step 3, second meeting, getting your mark. Little known fact, Slenderman puts a scar on his proxies to identify them as a proxy, a slave mark, a brand to claim you as its servant. Step 4, interchangeable with 3, getting used to Slenderman and Slender Sickness. Eventually, the extreme paranoia and fear turns into a feeling of comfort, because he doesn't have to drive you insane anymore. You are already his. You have surrendered yourself to him. The possession is successful. Any of the horrible Slender Sickness symptoms, minus amnesia, blackouts, which will still occur even when you are a proxy, because the Genie is taking you over and using your body in order to affect the physical world. Step 5, Strange Habits and Urges. The weird urge to draw the operator symbol and eventually doing it without thinking and out of nowhere. It is near impossible to stop yourself. Your muscles will control themselves. Do it against your will. Strange habit number 2 is walking into the woods every day against your will and the strange urge to be outside more. Because genies prefer to be outside. And if you are under some form of possession, then this genie, the slender genie, would be able to control your body to some minor extent to be able to draw this operator symbol. After getting your mark, you are now technically a proxy, because you are now this genie's slave.
So, I feel like I have made my case. Either you are convinced that if Slenderman is real, it would probably be actually a genie, which are often mistaken to be demons. Oftentimes people think they are demons, which is kind of what I was trying to get at earlier, like 5, 10, 20 minutes ago, however long this video is turning out to be, about the idea and understanding of what a demon is. So, depending on your understanding, a genie could indeed technically be a type of demon. However, that's not how I see it, but it's open to interpretation. What we think to be a demon might actually be one of the Djinn, since their modus operandi is very similar. So, you might be asking me now, if it is a genie, and it is a very real thing, and there is a very real threat, how do we defend ourselves? Well, I'm glad you asked, or you didn't, and I am just adding extra information because I want you to be safe out there and to protect yourself against the Djinn. At least the bad ones, the ones that would wish to do you harm. And if Slenderman is actually one of these mythical Djinn, I'm having a hard time saying Djinn because it's hard for my mouth to actually enunciate and say properly. So if you hear me pause, it's because I don't want to just say Djinn or Zin or Shin for that matter. How do we protect ourselves and fight the Djinn? In Middle Eastern lore, many of the Middle Eastern people being deeply religious, especially hundreds of years ago when these stories were created, many of them are associated with biblical and Quranic stories and characters. One of the most recurring characters would be King Solomon, because there is a story about King Solomon that when he was building his temple, he had ordered several demons and Djinn alike to be his slaves in order to help create the temple. He was able to entrap and ensnare and enslave several genie in order to help build the temple. Fun story. There is actually a book, which is a magical grimoire. There is no proof to suggest that it is actually the grimoire of King Solomon. However, it is a grimoire that lists all of the 72 demons and Djinn that King Solomon had under his slavery. It also has a list of the angels, a list of the zodiac, and how to protect yourself against these demons. And mind you, if this thing, pretending to be Slenderman, is actually a demon, these tactics will work. If it is actually a Djinn, these tactics will work. If it is a Tulpa, and you believe that it will work, Because it is a tulpa, and because you believe that it will work, you are now imposing that upon the tulpa, and it will work. And the more people that believe that these tactics of defense and protection will work, the more power you have to it, against it. What am I trying to say? The Solomonic Grimoire, also known as the Lemegeton, or the Ars Solomonis Regis. 5-part book. In the first part, the Goetia is a list of the 72 demonic entities. There is also a sigil within the grimoire, which we are all very familiar with, known as the Devil's Trap. Yes, the Devil's Trap from the TV show Supernatural is actually from an actual magic grimoire. Let me prove it to you.
So, here we are. The Key of Solomon. Now, mind you, within the Lemegeton, which it's French, so I'm going to say it's probably properly pronounced Lemegeton, but Lemegeton for now. This right here is one of the many plates or sigils that are used for protection against dark forces. This is not the only one. However, this is where there is plenty of information on the devil traps, also known as the Key of Solomon, the Devil's Trap. The Key of Solomon in Latin, Clavis Solomonis or Clavicula Solomonis, or in Hebrew Maftia Shalomon, is a grimoire or book on magic attributed to King Solomon, probably dating to the 14th or 15th century Italian Renaissance, and presenting a typical example of Renaissance magic. It is possible that the Key of Solomon inspired later works, particularly the 17th century grimoire known as the Clavicula Solomonis, the Lesser Key of Solomon, although there are many differences between the books. The text dates to the late Middle Ages or the Italian Renaissance. Many much later grimoires attributed to King Solomon were written in this period, ultimately influenced by earlier high medieval works of Jewish Kabbalistic and Arab alchemists, which in turn hark back to Greco-Roman magic of late antiquity. Several versions of the Key of Solomon exist in various translations and with minor significant differences. The archetype was likely a Latin or Italian text dating to the 14th or 15th century. Most extant manuscript date to the late 16th or 17th or 18th century, but there is an early Greek manuscript dating to the 15th century closely associated with the text. The Greek manuscript is referred to as the Magical Treatise of Solomon and was published by Armand Dalat in Anecdota Atheniensia. I don't speak this language. Its contents are very similar to the Clavicula, and it may in fact be the prototype on which the Italian or Latin text was based. There's a number of later texts. There's many versions of this dated from multiple different sources. How to use it? The Devil's Trap is an excellent way to prison a person who is possessed by a demon. We only urge you to consider having some holy water, but to hurt the demon and make it not use its powers to break the seal. It has to be sealed, which is why it's called a seal or a sigil. If that circle or any part of it is broken, then the demon can be freed. Barring the demon is not the only thing you should do to help the person. The rite of exorcism must be read facing the demon to send it straight back to hell. So if a person is possessed, this is the way to do it. This is also the same exact exorcism spell, incantation, that is used in the show Supernatural. Basically, we get the idea. And there are several different plates, sigils, or devil's traps that are used, this being one of the main ones. There is also the most common one, which are these. I'm going to suggest either using this one here, like this, or this one, which is much more difficult to draw. However, my go-to is always this one. It works. This is actually used more as a ward against demons and demonic forces, as well as Djinn. This is more of a ward because it is a lower level sort of skill, if you will. But it's still effective. However, how do I phrase it? I use them as wards because it can trap any negative entity, but it is more easy to be sensed by a negative spirit, so they will avoid it altogether before they become trapped. So this works as a ward, but it can also be used as a trap. These are the ones that I use personally, because I'm into this kind of shit.
So, yes, the people in Supernatural that wrote the show and produced the show actually did their homework. The Devil's Trap is actually based in real magic. I know this all sounds fanciful, it all sounds crazy and ridiculous, and I may have made myself look just a little bit more crazy by making this video. But in the very least, I had fun. So, on the closing note, whether you want to believe it or not, this is actual research that I have actually put into this, and I have actually pieced together how I believe Slenderman is actually a genie, or is several genie, for all we know. Could also be a Tulpa, could also be a demon. Or it could be something that I've completely overlooked entirely and am not even aware about. In conclusion, I will say that this is what I usually do to protect myself from most negative entities. Being a paranormal investigator and researcher, I have picked up a few things throughout the years and learned how to protect myself just in case something follows me back home. This is what I do. Sage. Sage is a white leaf, usually dried and bundled, and if you burn it, it is said to repel negative entities. Now, in my experience, what it does is it doesn't make everything good and clean, it will render the area neutral. So it's not good or bad energies, but it does make most negative spirits run the other way. After that, you're going to want to use Palo Santo, which is a stick that has been blessed and cured by South American shamans, and by lighting it, you're going to have to light it several times because it burns out and there's just a little bit of char at the end of it. It works similarly to sage, but instead of neutralizing and cleansing the area, it will make things a blessed, positive energy, if you believe in it. If you don't, it still seems to work if you believe in any of this. After you have used the sage and the Palo Santo, I would strongly recommend that you put up some of these devil traps. One in every room in your home, and one in every hallway and highly trafficked area. I am going to suggest that you draw it because it is supposed to be drawn in either pencil, pen, or chalk. Because I don't understand it, but in my research you need to have the sigil separate from the original surface on which you are drawing it. That way it can be sort of its own thing to direct the energy, if you will. If you print it out, it's all one flat thing. There's no separation from the sigil and the surface. Don't ask me how it works, I don't know. This is just what I have researched and found out. And this is one of the ways that you're going to be able to help a friend who has been turned into a proxy. Or if you are being stalked by Slenderman yourself, this is going to help. Because even if it is a tulpa, and you believe it will work, this will make it, Slenderman, be repelled by it. And the more people who subscribe to the fact, the idea, the notion that these tactics will work, the more likely it is to work. So, normally, I would say go tell your friends about this so they can bring the fight against Slenderman. However, I don't really see Slenderman as a real huge ongoing thing, but in the off chance that you are one of the people or know somebody who's been plagued by Slenderman and you don't think that it's just them going crazy, this could work for you or them. In the very least, even if you think I'm crazy and full of shit, were you entertained? I hope so. I was. So, that concludes today's coffee table internet adventure. If you have a subject that you would like to see me research, cover, and extrapolate upon, I am very open to suggestions. I am not going to say that this is definitive, absolute proof. If you have something in order to refute this or correct me upon, please feel free to let me know, and links would be greatly appreciated. I would like to learn, I would like to know, and if I'm wrong, I would like to be able to correct myself. Don't take everything I say at face value. Do the research yourself. Always be careful, especially when dealing with the supernatural. That being said, I am going to shush my face, and I am going to part ways with you. Until next time, much love. Peace out. Namaste. And here's a hint at the next coffee table internet adventure, whenever that might come around. All right. Bye-bye.